Let me attempt to see if I can nail everybody down right now that's watching this. Keep watching if you are currently parenting someone day to day. Keep watching if you're being parented by someone. Keep watching if you're a caretaker for a parent or you have been before. Keep watching if you have been parented before or if you served in the role of a parental figure. I think that probably got most of us. And in light of COVID-19 social isolating, it's likely that if you're serving one of these roles, you've had much more exposure to opportunities to be a parent. And kids and teens, you've had a lot more opportunities to be parented. Are you guys having fun or what? Hello, my name is Luke Jackson, and I'm one of the ministers at Albany Church of Christ. Welcome to my new series of videos I'm going to call Roles We Play. I'd like to take some time over the next few weeks to discuss with you all what we can learn about ourselves, about God, and about others from the various roles that we play in a day-to-day basis. So what roles am I talking about? You got the parent role, spouse role, child, teenager, friend, employee. There's a lot of different hats, a lot of different roles that we participate in. And I hope you can join me the next handful of weeks as I discuss these different roles. And even if you don't right now participate in one of these roles, in the future you may, or you may know somebody, and these may allow you to learn a little bit about other people and about God in a fresh way. In this episode today, I began making comments about parents and being parented. And for many of us, COVID-19 social isolation has really shaken up what this role looks like, hasn't it? Parents have had probably a little more time around their kids, and kids vice versa with their parents. And if that weren't enough, all of these support systems like grandparents and friends and churches are being told to keep their distance. This is a unique time, to say the least. And even if it comes to an end soon, I hope we can look back on these moments and learn about ourselves and learn about God. And for those of you who aren't parents, who are too young or who aren't interested or aren't sure about this, I hope you can continue to tune in today as you look toward potentially becoming a parent in the future. And as you evaluate this or potentially venture into this role later on, maybe you'd be able to head into it with a more informed perspective on how God can use it. I myself have been a parent for 3 years, so I'm by no means any expert on parenting, and I hope you don't hear me today as condescending or judgmental or someone who has it all together in my role, because I surely don't. If you know me, I may have told you before how I tend to, for a few years, I felt like Ashley's intern as a parent. And there's been some days where if my parenting were an internship site, I may have been kicked out for subpar performance. But stopping here for a minute, even though I joke about this, I'd like to make something clear. Being a parent is not a performance. That being said, many of us, including myself sometimes, act as though it is. So this can be an important role to look into today as we talk about God and ourselves. So here's where I'd like to go with you today. How does our relationship with God and His truth inform us about the role of a parent? And on the flip side, how does the role of being a parent inform us about our relationship with God? So let's start here with our relationship with God and how this impacts us as a parent. The Bible uses several images and even you could call it roles to describe who God is and our relationship with Him. And one of the most common, if not the most common, way that God is described and as He relates to us is a father. Now, this role of father is really influential for a lot of us. To the point to where, as I begin to talk about God as my Heavenly Father, I begin thinking of my earthly father and all the experiences that I've had with Him and how I relate to Him. And I don't know what this role of father means to you, but I do know that many people don't know their fathers at all. Many people have been mistreated by their fathers. And on the other side of things, many people have idolized their fathers. There's a lot of different ways that people think about their fathers, and if it's possible for you right now, I'd like to, no matter where you're at, just put those on the side, kind of put those on the shelf, and let's focus for a minute on God, our Father. Let's flood our perspective right now with the parable of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15 to kind of ground us in that. Jesus Himself describes the way that God relates to us through a metaphor here, story, describing a father relating to his son, and He's trying to tell us something about God. Now, without getting too much into the parable, let's just see how this father in this story that Jesus shares responds to his son. And just for a refresher, Jesus tells the parable of where a father has two sons, and the younger son asked his father for his inheritance while his father is still alive, ouch, and then goes and spends it all on reckless living. And then the son gets to a point to where he has nowhere else to go, he's eating out of pigs' pens, and he's hungry, and he decides to return back to his father, hopefully to be treated as one of his father's hired servants. So after messing up, the son is thinking about how he can come back to his father, and he kind of acknowledges that the only way he could possibly come back into his father's life, to enter into a relationship with him again, or to have even his basic needs met of food and shelter, would be for the son to earn them, that he would have to work as a hired servant instead of being a son. And that's kind of where the son's at. So the son has all this in his head. He's been mulling over the words he's going to say to his father, and as he walks towards his father, after all this, the father blows all the expectations and thoughts that the son has made out of the water. The father he runs to his son and embraces him and dresses him in the finest clothes, and then throws a welcome party to welcome him back as a son that he was lost and now he's found. So what is Jesus telling us about God as God relates to us? What is he trying to tell us with this story? Jesus is telling us, for one, that God's love is not based upon any merit, any award, or anything that we have done. He is telling us that God has chosen to give us everything, not because we deserve it as good and awesome people, but just because God has chosen to love us. Jesus took the punishment that we deserved. That even though Jesus from eternity has been with God in this intimate Trinitarian relationship, Jesus actually became separated from God when he bore the wrath and the punishment that we deserved, the separation that we deserve from God, so that we could be reunited with God as our Father, so that we could embrace God and he could embrace us. Talk about a good Father. So, what does all this about our relationship with God inform us about the role as a parent? And more specifically, how does God's unconditional love to us inform our love to our children? Well, first off, it shows that the love parents give to their children should not be based upon any kind of merit or the things that the child does. And this can be a really difficult thing to actually execute. When you've told your child over and over again to not do something, and then they look back at you and smile, then do it again. Or when your child incessantly bothers all of their siblings at the same time, and then you. When your child doesn't live up to their abilities in school, sports, or any other activity. There's so many different ways and reasons that it can be difficult to love our children unconditionally, and this is where grace comes into the picture. Just as God has forgiven us, we should too forgive our kids. Just as God's love for us does not have strings attached, our love for our kids should not have strings attached to any merit or anything that they do or any behavioral requirement. So this raises a question. What do we do then when our child makes a mistake or is headed in the wrong direction? Yes, we understand, and many parents who are Christian would agree, yes, I should love my child unconditionally, but then when it comes to our children making mistakes or falling, it kind of gets a little murky. So here comes my second point. The father in the parable of the prodigal son allowed his child to make a mistake and allowed him to make his own decision. Now, I hope you don't hear this as a blanket statement or as a blank check, okay? Be careful. God's awesome love for us doesn't translate into parents just allowing their kids to do whatever they want. That's not what I'm doing here. In fact, it's nearly the opposite. Part of loving our children is training them and disciplining them in the Lord and training them to eventually leave the nest. When Avery, my 7-month-old, entered the world, she was completely dependent on us as her caregivers to give her nutrients, to give her what she needed. She couldn't sit up, she couldn't crawl, she couldn't really communicate even through facial expressions just yet. But then slowly and surely, it's been neat to watch her as she has gained skills and abilities to enable us to let her play by herself some, to have a little bit of freedom and independence, and to eat finger foods by herself and make a mess and explore the world by herself a little bit. Now, as we fast forward to when Avery's a teenager, which I'm not really looking forward to be honest, we will be walking the tough road that many of you parents are walking through right now that I work with and I've related to. And it's a tough place to navigate. Knowing how much freedom and how much to allow our kids to make mistakes and fail is just really difficult to conceptualize. And I really wish there was a chart that I could attach to this video that would just give us all the answers. And if any of you do have a chart of that nature, please send it to me. But realistically, it seems that we should balance two sort of concepts as parents in this. On one side, we should allow our children to make our decisions and mistakes in an age-appropriate way, and then use these moments, bad or good, to train and disciple them towards God and towards growth. So that's one side. On the other side, parents also need to sometimes step in to advocate or even to protect their children from suffering or harm. And like I said, this can be a tough line to walk. It's tough to know which side we should err on in the given moment. And some of us tend to err on the side of protecting our kids and all the time, even if they in that moment may not necessarily need it. And this you could see how this could become a hindrance for some kids. And I don't like labels at all, but I've heard about one method of parenting referred to as lawnmower parenting, or as I was actually heard the phrase up here, snowplow parenting. And in case you haven't heard of this, these sort of parents tend to pave the way for their kids. They tend to remove any obstacles or mow over them or plow them away so that the kids don't come into contact with challenges or obstacles. And in reflecting about this, you can kind of see how this could be problematic for children as they grow and develop. If parents constantly pave the way through life for a kid, then once the kid finally gets out of the house and have real responsibilities and make real decisions, then they might become debilitated and not know what to do or how to handle things on their own. And even though my kids are on the younger side of things, I have caught myself a few times erring on this side of lawnmower parenting. And as I step back and think about it sometimes, 9 times out of 10, I am mowing the lawn of my children's lives, if you will, out of fear. I'm filled with fear in these moments. I'm afraid of my child falling physically or other ways. I'm afraid of my child not succeeding in the future. I'm afraid of my children being alone in the future. I'm afraid of my child not being good enough. I'm afraid of my child not feeling loved and knowing that they're loved. There's so many things, and your fears may look different than mine. But in the end, fear shows us in this moment that we aren't trusting. 1 John 4:18 says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love." This verse is comforting to me, and yet other times it's quite challenging. As we operate in this role of a parent, there's going to be times where we won't be able to control a situation or predict a mistake or fix a situation. And that's really difficult. We live in a world fallen in sin, and it can be really scary sometimes. So how is it possible for all of us not to just resort to being reactive, to being fearful and mowing over or plowing over any obstacle, challenge, or potential suffering that our kids go through? How is that possible? Well, it actually goes back to our relationship with God, of course. In 1 John, a few verses earlier, in 1 John 4:4, it says, "Little children, you are from God and have overcome them. For he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world." So when it comes down to it, our relationship with God must inform our role as parents. People operating in the parent role have a huge responsibility to train and disciple our kids in the Lord. That being said, ultimately, no matter how good of a parent we are, no matter how much we look into things, do our research, pay attention to the most updated data and videos, God is the one who is holding our kids. It is God who will be with them for eternity. We only have them for a short amount of time. When our kids walk into school, when our kids form new relationships, when our kids take their first steps, we can't always guarantee that we'll be there, and that's difficult. But we can guarantee that God will always be with them. And not only so, but as they leave and make decisions, they can continue to grow as they have to lean more on God and not us as parents. And that can be a scary and yet really important process. So when it comes down to it, if God can keep us, then God can keep our kids. And we have to trust that. Now, as you hear all this, I hope you are challenged by it as I am. It's difficult to put this into practicalities. And if you're parenting out of a place of fear most of the time instead of love once you think about it and observe your role and assess it. Maybe this may be a time to see how your relationship with God is doing. Maybe this might be a really good way to measure how close or how far you are from God. And if you look at this and you realize you have some work to do and you have some distance to cut with your relationship with God, join the club. It's difficult, and especially right now with our social distancing and everything, it's really difficult to be connected to anybody or anything right now. So I'd like to conclude our time together with just a few practical places to begin for us, and this certainly doesn't answer any questions or any of the amount of suffering or fix any parenting out. I hope you don't take this and think it'll fix everything for you, but it may be a really good place to start as we begin to become more grounded in the Lord as we parent. The first thing, get back in the Word. If we as parents are not resting and feasting on God's Word, then we will likely end up running on empty. And if we are running on empty, we may easily just resort to operating out of a place of fear, frustration, or burnout, and we could be very reactive and not think through our decisions and think through our responses to our kids, and it could be harmful for everybody. So taking the time to spend with God in His Word, to rest in Him and know that we are loved and that we can trust in Him, is actually a good thing for not only you, but for your family, and that it can help you come back fresh, and that time is essential. Number two, get feedback and support. If you are married or you have a co-parent, this could be a great resource to tap into. After big or small moments happen with your child or your children, maybe you take some time to talk about them every once in a while and ask for some feedback, or ask how your partner saw things happen in you and how you responded. Seeing yourself from a fresh pair of eyes outside of yourself may be really helpful. It might reveal something that you may not have noticed about yourself, and this may lead you to some further reflection and a further way to measure how you're doing. And beyond just feedback, though, we should also not be afraid to ask for support. That we don't have to do this alone, that we can ask friends, we can ask parents, we can ask people around us. I know it looks different right now in our society, but there are ways that we can have investment of other adults to influence our kids. And research shows, at least in the church, that if we can have other adults invest in our children, in addition to the parents, that it increases the likelihood of children and teens once they graduate high school to stay in the Lord. And that's something that we need to look to. So whatever you do with this role of being a parent, I hope you can use it to glorify God. That your family name, that your legacy is not meant to promote your own stature, but it's meant to promote God. That God built this relationship structure to train not only our kids, but to train us to depend on Him. I hope we can use this awesome and sometimes exhausting relationship to reveal God to us in a unique way. And like I said earlier, if you aren't a parent or if you aren't interested in that, I hope that you can look around at other parents or even serve in a parental role, a spiritual parent, in a way that can reveal God to you in a way that you haven't discovered just yet. Well, thank you for tuning in to my first episode of the Roles We Play series, and I hope to see you next time.